by its chief, Reinhard Gehlen. And the deal essentially was that military intelligence unit, it had some 4,000 on-the-ground agents inside the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc in Eastern Europe. So it was rather extensive. Well, Gehlen was left, according to this deal, in day-to-day operational charge of this network. The CIA only very nominally controlled it. But what this did, in effect, Bill, was it made us reliant after the war on basically a group of Nazi military intelligence providing us estimates of Soviet military capabilities and intentions. And it's known now that Gehlen deliberately overestimated those capabilities and intentions for the express purpose of getting us into an arms race with the Soviet Union. The other half of that coin is that it's also known that the NKVD, later the KGB, turned a bunch of Gehlen's agents into double agents. Now, to me, that's kind of interesting because, you know, loyalties of double agents are always going to be in question, and we might be dealing with triple agents that are still loyal, basically, to Gehlen and to the Nazi cause. So I think you have to open up the possibility that they're deliberately overestimating American military intentions and capabilities to the Soviets to get them into an arms race with us. And the net result, as you've pointed out, is in this stalemate, what they're really doing is they're creating maneuvering room, not only for Germany, but they're creating maneuvering room for this post-war Nazi international organization. So, yeah, I think your observation there is just spot on. I think that's exactly what happened.
And the strategy here is to have these two superpowers in a stalemate condition.
Right, exactly.
And then in the meantime, these high-ranking Nazi officials, they run off to Argentina.
Yeah. They run off to Argentina, and that's where the story gets interesting because
And let me stop
Sure.
you right there. They not only
Sure.
run off to Argentina, but they also run off with a tremendous amount of wealth. And
yes.
I recall during your lecture there, you were showing some of the loot they had, stockpiles of gold.
Oh, yes.
So folks out there, you're dealing with a renegade group of Nazi officials running off to Argentina, extremely wealthy, and with a very interesting project here called the Nazi Bell Experiment.
Right.
So, we'll continue what you were talking about there, Joe.
Well, one of the things, and to kind of tie all this together so that people can see where we're headed, there's three men that I believe escaped to Latin America. One, of course, is Martin Bormann, who is the actual chief of the Nazi Party itself, okay? And he's sort of the Amanos Grise for Adolf Hitler. He controls anyone who has access to Hitler, controls what they're going to talk about, controls how long they're going to see him, and so on and so forth. So this man is very, very powerful. And he's also a financial wheeler-dealer. He knows how to handle large amounts of money and handle it well. So with Bormann, we have finance, okay? The second man, I believe, escapes to Latin America is a close Bormann associate by the name of Heinrich Müller. And Müller was actually the head of the Gestapo. His nickname is Gestapo Müller, and that kind of says it all. So with this man, we have someone who is perfectly capable of running intelligence and security for any post-war Nazi organization. The final man that escapes, I think, to Argentina is an SS general by the name of Hans Kammler. And again, if you recall the first hour, he is the actual SS general that was in charge of all of Nazi Germany's secret research projects, including the Bell, okay? So in other words, he's not only Dr. von Braun's boss, but he's the boss of the scientists that were involved in coming up with this very exotic technology and experiment. So with these three men, you have the indicators that this post-war extraterritorial Nazi state is really set up financially with all of the wealth that you mentioned that they get out of Europe. You have an organization that's set up to run security and intelligence, and incidentally, I should point out something. The security for General Kammler's secret weapons think tank, which basically was what it was run by none other than Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo, personally run by him. So in other words, we've got yet another indicator that this post-war Nazi organization is bound and determined to continue its independent research on some of these exotic projects. And again, I stress the fact that they give the Allies and the Soviets other technology, but this technology they keep to themselves and evacuate as much as they can of it to Latin America, where they continue experiments after the war. So that's the big story that's going on here. What happens in Argentina is really one of the most interesting stories, and I take a great deal of time to cover it in my book, The Nazi International, and I touched on it at Laughlin. In Latin America, in Argentina, Juan Perón had set up a secret project ostensibly for the purpose of investigating controlled thermonuclear fusion. And the scientist, the German scientist that was running this project, was a fellow by the name of Dr. Ronald Richter, and he's the one I mentioned in the first hour, that the U.S. Air Force...
Let me stop you right there. You mentioned fusion, or is it fission?
No, fusion, thermonuclear fusion, the same stuff that goes on in hydrogen bombs and ostensibly in stars, okay? That's the project that Juan Perón was, that in itself is a whopper, you know?
Yeah.
But, this guy...
Okay.
Yeah, this guy Richter is quite an interesting character because Richter apparently had some success in the experiments that he had been doing down in Argentina. So he reports these to Perón, who's sort of his project mentor and backer, all right? Well, Perón then does an extremely silly thing. What he does is he holds a press conference in Buenos Aires in 1951. And he proudly announces to the Argentine press that Argentina has just learned the secret of the hydrogen bomb, okay? And, of course, the press dutifully reports this, and then the story's picked up by, obviously, the Western press, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and almost immediately, as you can expect, the whole project is roundly denounced by just about every scientist in the world as being fraudulent. So Perón, at this point, facing this denunciation of all these scientists, decides, well, he's going to get to the bottom of this and investigate just what's going on in this secret project. So he appoints a scientific commission of some Argentine nuclear physicists, and they travel 900 miles away from Buenos Aires to go to this secret project, which incidentally, I should specify, is located close to the little town of San Carlos de Bariloche in Rio Negro province. It's a very, very remote area of Argentina. And interestingly enough, close to San Carlos de Bariloche, the Nazis during the war had purchased 10,000 square miles of Argentine land. Now, Bill, that's an area about the size of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, okay? So they have this enormous compound down there in Argentina, which, as it turns out, to gain access to, you have to go through German guards. It's all being run by SS security. You have to have the proper papers and identification and so on and so forth. Well, this is close to where Richter's project is actually headquartered, okay? So in other words, the people really running this project are a bunch of Nazis, not Perón. Perón is just sort of the front man. And he spilled the beans on this project. So we have Argentine scientists going down there to investigate. And at this juncture, Bill, some really oddball behavior for a nuclear scientist occurs because Richter, right in front of the Argentine scientists, deliberately either forgets to turn on his measuring equipment or he locates his measuring equipment behind radioactive shielding where it will do him absolutely no good whatsoever when he's showing these Argentine scientists what he's doing. In other words, his behavior is such that it looks like he's going out of the way to make not only the project but himself look incompetent, okay? And the real icing on the cake is that he takes them to a heavy water production facility, okay? And he tells them that this is where we're making the heavy water for all of our experiments. So the Argentine scientists ask the logical question, well, how much heavy water are you making? And Richter's response just floors me because, and you can read it in my book, The Nazi International. I reproduce it all there. It just floors me because Richter says, well, we don't really know how much heavy water we're producing because